The first crack in the perfect suburban dream didn't come from noisy neighbors or uncut lawns. It came from the roof. When one homeowner decided to install solar panels, it wasn't just about lowering bills. It was about independence, security, and a future not dictated by the power company. But in communities ruled by homeowners associations, even sunlight itself can become a source of conflict. What should have been a celebration of clean energy quickly turned into a high-stakes standoff, one that revealed the HOA cared less about property values and more about control. It started with frustration. Month after month, the electric bill kept climbing. Every summer, the air conditioning pushed costs to new heights, and every winter, heating drained the wallet further. The homeowner began researching ways to break free from the endless cycle, and solar panels stood out as the perfect solution. But this wasn't just about saving money. It was about creating something lasting. Panels would add value to the home, shield the family from unpredictable rate hikes, and provide a sense of independence that few suburban households ever get to feel. The plan was simple. Hire a reputable installer, follow the latest state energy guidelines, and join the millions of Americans already making the switch. Permits were filed. Inspections were scheduled. The system design was approved. The contractor explained that within weeks, sunlight would be powering their home. It felt like progress. It felt like freedom. Neighbors noticed the crew taking measurements on the roof and asked curious questions. Some seemed genuinely interested. A few even mentioned they'd thought about doing the same thing themselves. For the homeowner, that only added to the excitement. Maybe this would be the start of a neighborhood trend, a wave of clean, responsible upgrades that could benefit everyone. But in the background, a different kind of attention was brewing. The HOA board had caught wind of the project, and their first reaction wasn't curiosity, it was suspicion. On paper, the HOA's guidelines for exterior changes were vague, written decades earlier, long before solar technology became mainstream. The rules spoke of maintaining uniformity, of preserving a traditional neighborhood aesthetic. There was no clear approval process for modern upgrades, which meant the board had all the power to decide what fit and what didn't. The homeowner wasn't worried at first. After all, this was an improvement that followed state energy laws and city regulations. The panels wouldn't harm anyone, wouldn't lower property values, and in many states, solar access rights were already protected. Surely the HOA wouldn't object to something so obviously beneficial. But when the first letter arrived, stamped with the HOA's insignia, the tone became clear. They demanded the project be halted immediately until proper approval could be granted. They cited vague concerns about aesthetic disruption and community harmony. The homeowner, caught between excitement and frustration, tried to comply. They submitted extra paperwork, photos, and detailed renderings of how the panels would look. Days turned into weeks, and the HOA remained silent. The installer warned that delays could push back the project indefinitely. And just when it seemed like the silence might mean approval, the second letter arrived. This time, the wording was sharper. The board officially declared that solar panels were not in line with the character of the community. Unless the homeowner removed all materials from the property, fines would begin accumulating. The dream of energy independence had just collided with the brick wall of HOA control. And this was only the beginning, because the homeowner wasn't about to back down. The second letter from the HOA wasn't just a warning, it was a shot across the bow. In crisp, legalistic language, the board declared that the solar panel installation was unauthorized and that fines of $50 per day would be imposed if the project continued. To the homeowner, it felt less like a rule and more like a ransom. The first wave of emotions was disbelief. How could clean energy, something that was legally permitted by the city, backed by state incentives and openly encouraged by environmental policy, suddenly be a crime within the walls of their own community? But disbelief quickly gave way to resolve. The homeowner knew that HOAs often counted on residents quietly giving in, afraid of fees or lawsuits. This time, however, the board had picked the wrong fight. The homeowner dug deeper. They discovered that their state had recently passed legislation known as a Solar Rights Act. These laws were designed precisely to stop HOAs from blocking solar installations, ensuring that property owners retained the right to harness renewable energy. The language was clear. Unless the system posed a safety hazard, the HOA could not deny the project outright. Armed with this knowledge, the homeowner wrote back. The letter was firm, but respectful. It explained the legal protections in place, attached state documents outlining the rights of homeowners, and formally requested that the board withdraw its objections. Days passed. No reply. Then came the fines. The first bill arrived, tucked inside the monthly HOA statement. $350 in violation penalties. The HOA had officially escalated the conflict. They weren't just trying to delay the project anymore. They were trying to bleed the homeowner into submission. Word began to spread around the neighborhood. Some residents quietly sympathized. A few even stopped by to express support, whispering that they admired the fight but didn't dare take on the board themselves. Others weren't so kind. Rumors circulated that the panels would be an eyesore, that they'd lower property values, that they would make the neighborhood look industrial. The homeowner realized this wasn't just a personal dispute anymore. The HOA was shaping the narrative, painting them as reckless, selfish, and disruptive. But the truth was more complicated. The HOA wasn't worried about aesthetics. They were worried about precedent. If one homeowner successfully defied their control, others might follow. The board's power rested on compliance, and this solar panel project threatened to unravel that obedience. With every letter, every fine, and every whispered rumor, the battle lines became clearer. This was no longer about panels on a roof. This was about who truly held authority in the neighborhood, the homeowners or the HOA board. And as the pressure mounted, the homeowner began preparing for the next move, one that would turn a quiet standoff into a community-wide showdown. The morning of the HOA meeting arrived like the calm before a storm. The clubhouse, usually a place for potlucks and holiday decorations, had been rearranged into a battlefield. Rows of folding chairs faced the long table where the board sat like judges behind their papers and microphones. At the center sat the HOA president, a man known for his rigid interpretations of rules and his dislike of being challenged. The homeowner walked in holding a thick binder, not just a folder of receipts or notes, but a full dossier. Inside were copies of state solar rights laws, emails exchanged with city inspectors, contractor permits, and even photographs of neighboring communities where solar panels blended seamlessly into rooftops. It wasn't just preparation, it was armor. Neighbors had gathered, curious about the drama that had been brewing for weeks. Some leaned forward, eager to see a confrontation. Others shifted nervously, worried that open conflict might shake the carefully polished image of their suburban enclave. The president began the meeting with a cold recitation of the violations: unauthorized modification, breach of community guidelines, fines owed to date. He spoke as though the matter was already settled. But then the homeowner stood. Calmly, they opened the binder and began to read. Not from opinion, not from emotion, but from the law itself. The room grew quiet as the words echoed through the clubhouse. No homeowners association may restrict or prohibit the installation of a solar energy system. It was a direct blow. The very foundation of the HOA's argument began to crumble under the weight of legislation they had conveniently ignored. Still, the board did not retreat. They pivoted. The president claimed the panels would disrupt uniformity and harm property values. He warned of visual pollution and accused the homeowner of acting selfishly. But this time, the homeowner was ready. They presented studies showing that solar panels could actually increase property values. They pointed out that major developers had begun including solar as a standard feature in new builds. They showed photographs of sleek, low-profile designs that barely caught the eye. The air in the room shifted. A murmur ran through the audience. The board's authority, once so absolute, suddenly looked shaky. Then, almost theatrically, the HOA attorney, a man brought in to intimidate, reminded everyone that the HOA had broad enforcement powers. But as he spoke, the homeowner flipped to the final page of their binder, a recent state Supreme Court ruling in favor of a homeowner whose HOA had tried the exact same tactic. It was checkmate. The tension broke not with applause, but with silence. The board shuffled their papers, the attorney frowned, and neighbors whispered among themselves. For the first time, the community could see the cracks in the board's armor. But even as victory seemed close, the homeowner knew the fight wasn't over. HOAs rarely surrendered gracefully. If they couldn't win on legal grounds, they would find another way to assert control. The question was, what would their next move be? The board left that meeting humiliated, but humiliation has a way of breeding quiet revenge. Though the homeowner had effectively proven their right to install solar panels, the HOA wasn't done. They retreated into the shadows, planning a campaign. That wasn't about the law anymore. It was about pressure. It began subtly. A letter appeared in the mailbox claiming the lawn was out of compliance, despite being freshly mowed and neatly edged. Days later, another notice accused the homeowner of leaving trash cans out too long, even though they'd been rolled in the same day. Each letter carried a fine. Each fine carried a threat. The strategy was simple. If they couldn't stop the solar panels, they would bury the homeowner under a mountain of nuisance violations. Neighbors started noticing. Some whispered in support, others stayed quiet out of fear, and a few openly sided with the board, muttering that rules are rules. But most watched the spectacle unfold like spectators at a boxing match, unsure which side would land the final blow. Then came the act that crossed the line. One evening, as the homeowner returned from work, they found a bright orange sticker slapped across their garage door. Notice of pending lien for unpaid fines. It was bold, it was public, and it was meant to shame. But the board had underestimated one thing: the homeowner's resilience. Instead of crumbling under the mounting pressure, they doubled down. They meticulously documented every violation notice, took time-stamped photos, and filed complaints with state regulators overseeing HOAs. They even reached out to local news reporters who'd been sniffing around for stories about overreaching associations. The turning point came when a neighbor, one who had secretly installed their own solar panels without permission years earlier, came forward with evidence. Photos, emails, and even receipts proved that the HOA had selectively enforced rules, punishing some while ignoring others. Suddenly, the board's campaign looked less like enforcement and more like harassment. Behind closed doors, panic set in among the board members. They knew that if the story went public, their carefully curated image as protectors of community standards would unravel. But pride and stubbornness kept them from backing down. The retaliation had escalated beyond solar panels. It had become a test of dominance, a question of whether one homeowner could stand up to an entire system designed to silence dissent. And the storm was about to break wide open, because what neither side knew was that the fight had drawn the attention of someone far outside the neighborhood, someone who had the power to turn this local battle into a statewide reckoning. The homeowner thought they were simply defending their right to harness the sun, but the HOA's relentless campaign of fines and threats had pushed this fight into uncharted territory. And then, almost out of nowhere, the story burst beyond the neighborhood's manicured lawns. A local reporter, tipped off by whispers of harassment and selective enforcement, ran a segment on the evening news. Footage of the orange lien notice sticker plastered across the garage flashed on screens all across town. Interviews with neighbors painted two opposing pictures, one of a determined homeowner standing up for progress, and another of a rigid HOA clinging to outdated control. That coverage sparked a chain reaction. Calls poured in from other residents across the state who had faced similar battles with their own associations. Lawmakers noticed, advocacy groups noticed, and suddenly, the fight over one set of solar panels wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. It was the face of a movement. The pressure mounted until the HOA had no choice but to back down. Their legal threats fizzled when confronted with clear evidence of selective enforcement. The lien notice was quietly withdrawn, the fines erased, and the solar panels, already soaking in sunlight, remained untouched. But the story didn't end at that driveway. Fueled by the media attention, state legislators introduced a bill limiting the power of HOAs to block renewable energy installations. Hearings were held, testimonies given, and within months, laws were passed that guaranteed homeowners the right to install solar panels without the fear of retaliation. The HOA board, once so eager to control, now found themselves infamous. Their name became shorthand for everything wrong with associations that had overstepped their bounds. Some members resigned under the weight of the backlash. Others clung to their positions, but their authority was fractured and their credibility shredded. As for the homeowner, they didn't just win their right to go solar. They became a symbol, the neighbor who stood tall when everyone else whispered in fear. Their panels gleamed under the sun, not just as a source of power, but as a quiet victory against control, intimidation, and outdated rules. And every time the lights flicked on inside that home, powered by clean energy the HOA had tried so hard to crush, it was more than just electricity. It was proof that even in the smallest corners of a neighborhood, one voice, when unwilling to bend, could spark change far beyond its fences. The fight had started with solar panels. It ended with a new law, a broken board, and a reminder etched into the neighborhood's history. Sometimes the only way to stop the shadows is to stand fully in the light.